Halloween is a beloved pastime celebrated by many people all around the world, and many know that it has its roots in the old Celtic tradition of Samhain. But how much of the quintessentially Halloween activities have their roots in ancient pagan rituals? What did people do when the veil between worlds thinned? And does Halloween actually have anything to do with the devil? Halloween has its roots in an ancient Celtic fire festival called Samhain, celebrated around the 1st of November. Some of the traditions could potentially date back to pre-Celtic Ireland. The first mention of Samhain in early Irish literature from the 9th century associates it with many mythological events that were important to the Irish of the time. These events are mostly centered around feasting, great gatherings, and the summoning of Neolithic zombies from their ancient burial mounds so they can dance around giant bonfires with their descendants. There were often two fires lit next to each other so that farmers could drive their cattle through the middle as a form of ritual cleansing while throwing the bones of dead animals into the flames, leading to the name bonfire. A form of divination practiced at this time was done by laying stones with the initials of the people present carved on them in a circle around the fire. Everyone would then run around the fire hooting and hollering and making a mess until morning, after which the stones would be examined, and any that were missing were said to contain the initials of the people that would not survive the year, probably because they were next in line as human sacrifices. Samhain may have ran for a total of 7 days in ancient times. 3 days before, 3 days after, plus the actual day of Samhain, or Summer's End as some translations suggest. Even though summer ended months ago, and they would have been well on their way into winter at that point of the year. By the end of the 9th century, whatever pagan celebrations that occurred at the time of Samhain had been assimilated into the Christian faith, and were now celebrated as All Saints' Day. And thus, the death of Samhain, except for the activities of some modern Celtic neo-pagan reconstructionist LARPers, was all but ensured, and the precursor to Halloween as we know it began. Many people think of pumpkins and trick-or-treating and whitewashed American neighborhoods when they think of Halloween, but that wasn't always the case. Pumpkins were originally turnips, trick-or-treating was called guising, and the neighbourhoods were actually rural towns in Ireland, Scotland, and other parts of the United Kingdom. The carving of faces into turnips was a custom practiced around Halloween time in Ireland in the early 19th century, and were generally thought to ward off the spirits passing through the thinning veil between worlds, or for men like Stingy Jack to light his way through his endless wandering of the earth after being denied into heaven or hell for being a proper Turnips for jack-o'-lanterns were replaced by the larger, softer, and easier to carve pumpkins when Halloween came to North America with Irish immigrants fleeing famines in the 19th century. Other activities that are considered traditionally Halloween-esque include things like bobbing for apples. Bobbing for apples is a tradition that dates back to pre-Roman Britain, being recorded when the invading Romans merged their own celebrations with traditional Celtic festivals. It is thought that the original purpose of bobbing for apples was for young unmarried people to try and bite into the apple in a bowl of water or suspended from a rope. The first person to bite into the apple would be the next person allowed to marry. Another possible origin of this is similar, but instead of biting the apple to be allowed to be married, the unmarried people would carve their initials into the apples, and whoever pulled your apple out of the water would be the person you could marry. Many of the original meanings behind these traditions have fallen to the wayside, although the practices have managed to stick around mostly as fun games for children, like trick-or-treating and bobbing for apples, or as a way for charlatans to make money off the gullible and suggestible, like divination. Some newer traditions have made their way into the modern Halloween celebrations, such as haunted houses and terrible slasher movies. These have become some of the more nostalgic features of the holiday for people today. But you can't deny that they still have features similar to the worship of those who had passed and the thinning of the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead. So whether you celebrate the holiday by dressing up as your favorite superhero and wandering the streets of an American neighborhood in search of the elusive drug-laced candy, or by throwing sacrificial bird bones into a bonfire in the woods with your mates dressed as animals while you play Ouija board and try to communicate with your great-great-aunt that was definitely a real-life witch, just remember that the origins of what you practice over the few days at the end of October began as a celebration of good harvest for the year and were for showing reverence to ancestors long past. Stay spooky, kids.